So here I'm going to talk a little bit more about the risk escalation and delegation. What is risk escalation? What is the risk delegation, and in what circumstances we can transfer it? So this is an important concept. You need to carefully listen to this section, and then we can move on and learn about the risk process itself, or risk management process, and risk register. So here there is a typical organizational chart. You can see here different levels of people are shown here in this chart. For example, people, top managers working at the top level of the company. We have tactical persons here in the middle section of this chart, and operational guys here at the down level. So people at the top level, they are dealing with the company vision. They are talking or thinking about next 10 years, for example, what is the goal of this company in the following decade. And also tactical people, they are thinking about the different strategies, how they can achieve the goal, and also visions instructed by the top managers. They also need to set goals at their own level, so they have their own goals as well. At the last layer, you can see people who are working in a construction site, dealing with the foundation kind of things, or different kind of suppliers, tradesmen. All those guys are here in this level. But what is the issue here? I'm going to show you this level because this is important, and we are going to talk about these guys a little bit more. These guys, are their objectives needs to be achieved in a month, a week, or a couple of months. So they are talking or thinking or planning for a short term. So what does it mean? It means they are doing many tasks quickly. Sometimes they don't have time to think about what kind of risk associated with that kind of tasks, and they don't have enough preparation or resources to focus on risk management. So that's why we need to consider all those guys as well, and also relevant suppliers, or maybe like a smaller family business companies, a couple of persons, like a few individuals involved in this process, and those guys have limited resources, and most of incidents happen at the construction level. So we are going to talk a little bit about this kind of risks, and also we have the macroeconomic risks, market uncertainties, and something that may affect on the whole company at the board level or top manager level. So the next item we need to know about it is how we deal with the risk. Is that something you own the risk, or someone else owns the risk? You should take the risk, or you can transfer or share the risks. So it's not something, we can't say all top risks are your responsibility, because you are a project manager, or you are a person working in that specific project. We need to deal with the risk ownership as well. So sometimes you can't deal with the risk, so you need to ask someone else with more resources to deal with that. So that's why we say there is a risk escalation technique here that is used if the risk is beyond your responsibility or authority. There are objectives at risk at different levels of your projects or organization. So our uncertainty should be considered for all objectives. So here we have different objectives at different level. We talked, when we have objectives, this means that risks will exist at different levels of your organization as long as uncertainties exist. However, you will deal with risks if it's a matter to you and may affect on your objectives. Of course, we need to consider objectives at different levels since they can be related to one another. For example, your risk could affect another risk above or below your level, so you're not going to deal with both of them, the one above you or below your level. Risk escalation and delegation refers to the process of passing risk upward and passing risk down or across to colleagues and subcontractors, like different stakeholders here at your level or maybe here working with you as well. So it should be considered that escalating the risk will increase the visibility of risk and will involve people with higher authority and seniority to act on it. So this goes up. Okay, so escalation refers to a formal process. Usually it's a formal process to highlight the risk to a higher authority. It is different than an issue at hand that you want to report to a higher authority because the issue is something is certain and you have it now. You need to solve it. There is a problem, you need to solve it, but the risk is uncertain. It's dealing with it's related to uncertainty and you haven't experienced it yet. So this is something you need to study a little bit about the risk. You need to estimate it, you need to analyze it, and it may happen or maybe not. For example, if a subcontractor is not able to do a specific activity, for example this subcontractor, then of course you at that time or maybe you are in the position to be aware of that and they are responsible for it, then you can escalate the risk to the superior to be considered. So this risk will go to higher level, maybe tactical level or maybe higher. You need to identify all risks related to project objectives at different layers or levels, relevant resources and intergroup conflicts. All that kind of things can be challenging and maybe related to the risk analysis. Ambiguous roles at the operation level and scope disagreements between subcontractors or suppliers or stakeholders can be all examples of situations calling for escalation. Why there is a need for a high level intervention? Because top managers have more authority or resources to take the risk. However, it is not correct to apply the escalation technique all the time, and you need to understand the situation very well first and then escalate it if it's appropriate. Otherwise, it has its own challenges at the project level or organization level. However, be noted that the escalation I'm talking about here is different than construction cost escalation, because construction cost escalation has a different meaning and it refers to the anticipated increase in the cost over the project life. The escalation usually occurs as a result of market forces or external forces. So here that's all about market. It's not about the operation level necessarily. But it has consequences later at different levels. So what we can do, this escalation is related to the cost. As I said, it's market forces or external forces, and all of them are beyond your control. It can increase the cost of labors, procurement, materials, and higher level of construction equipment, plant operation process. All that can be affected because of the external forces or macroeconomic forces, or like an example, recent example is the coronavirus or COVID-19 that affected on the community, and this affected on the labor availability, material availability, and all that kind of requirements. And all of them, of course, will affect on your project objectives. Sometimes you can't continue, you need to stop, or you will need to deal with different kind of health and safety issues later. So you usually delegate the risk to an individual or a subcontractor who normally work with you, but this is risk delegation. So in risk delegation is something is not you're gonna escalate it to the top level. This goes down, or somebody at your level or a subcontractor, he's working with you usually in the project. So this is the risk delegation, a different concept. And if you pass the risk down, it is called risk delegation, and it means you're aware of the risk at your level, but you are passing it to someone to manage it because you consider it as a part of your response plan and also their responsibility to do that. Okay, we move to the next slide. Here you can see list of construction risks. For example, what kind of risks can be identified at the construction site level, like technical issues may happen in the future, but you don't know, it's not a current problem but can be in the future. Defective system design can cause such a problem, and then you need to deal with that probably in the future. And defective workmanship, unavailability of plant, if you need any specific mobile crane at the time and it's not available in the market, and site conditions differing from those originally determined, because in the documentation, drawings, and specification they are talking about a specific soil condition, but when you are digging after 1, 2, 3 meters digging, you will see totally different condition. You will see the soil is not really the same as what determined before. Is a rock, is not soil. So it's not sand. Is some, you need different tools, different kind of people to deal with that, and it will increase the construction cost, and it has a few consequences. And of course you need to deal with different kind of incidents, probably when you're working with different tools and equipment in a construction site, and you need to consider the failure to instruct labors adequately because your supervisor are not experienced enough. You can see in the right side a list of different risks as well, or problems that probably will happen in the future, but you're not sure about the level of probability, and also it's not a certain issue at the moment. So it's just an example, but you can use it and develop it further later. So there are examples here, examples of questions to simplify the risk management process, to simplify the concept of this process, but let's see the triple constraint of the project. You need to consider your project plan objectives, cost, what is the cost or budget of that specific project with a specified scope of the work, and because you have a specific deliverables, and then the cost associated with that deliverables should be defined properly, and the estimation should be accurate enough, and then you need to finalize the time and estimate the time before you start the project. And of course, quality is something we need to add in the middle of this triple, because the quality should be always considered by you guys in the project. So you need to identify and manage if the project is on track, and we need to plan if something happens, then what is the next, what course of actions are appropriate to deal with that specific risk. Some of triple constraints are changing. These constraints are changing during the project, and there is uncertainty to achieve them. So that's why we need a risk management process to be considered. And for example, here PM Bouquet suggested something like one of those publications, actually one of those versions, mentioning that we need this stepwise process. We need to follow that, like a plan risk management, identify it, perform some kind of analysis that can be qualitative, quantitative, then response plan, monitor and control risk. This is a natural way, I guess everyone, even without looking at this chart, can plan such a process, can consider such a process. It's a natural way. But I'm going to talk about a couple of steps here, a couple of questions, a series of questions that can help you to understand this a bit in a natural way. So you need to say what you want to achieve in your project, and at your level. For example, you are going to excavate somewhere, or you're going to do a foundation. What kind of objectives do you have? You need to understand the scope of the work, and then what can affect your objectives. If you want to do piling, for example, one thing can affect your objective and your operational process is weather, for example, or shortages of laborers. So you need to identify risks and uncertainties. Then the next question or step is to identify if they are equally important, which one is the most important one, which one is the least important one. And this needs a little bit qualitative or quantitative risk assessment to identify likelihood and impact of that specific risk. Then of course you need to answer the question, what should we do to respond to the risk? What is your risk plan, mitigation, prevention plan? Can you avoid or reduce it, transfer it, share it, take it, delegate it, or escalate it? We talked about it. And sometimes you transfer it. Transfer is something that you, at your level or your organization, you transfer risk based on a specific contract to a different supplier or contractor. So that's a way to transfer. We have so many different types of contracts in construction, and one of the main purposes of that kind of contracts is how to transfer it, and transfer to whom. Then the next step is you need to have a response plan. Of course, previously you designed it, but did your response plan work? You need to confirm, was it effective, and if not, why? You need to learn and learn from that and record it, because you have other projects or similar projects to do in the future. And then at the end, what has changed, what has changed. You may need to adapt to changes and continue, or you need a different course of action.